Hi, and welcome to Quests by Community. This is Ricky Spencer, and today we're going to be talking all things space and place within a queerness lens, and some of my favourite topics on Queertopia. And what does Qtopia mean? Who's it for? And what is the best way to experience it? We are very privileged today to have George Savoulis, who is a seasoned creative director, curator, and architect renowned for his exceptional work across the globe. With an illustrious career spanning 2 decades, Savoulis boasts extensive experience in delivering outstanding creative projects and installations worldwide. His expertise encompasses design, architecture, creative direction, curatorial, and major events creative. Throughout his career, Savoulis has collaborated with prestigious entities, leaving an indelible mark on the international event scene. Notable highlights include the contributions to the Sydney Gay and Lesbian Mardi Gras, the Australian Olympic Committee, and ANZ. His pivotal role in shaping events such as the Commonwealth Games and pioneering initiatives for Qantas underscores his impact on the industry. Welcome to our wonderful show today, George. It's an incredible bio that I've been reading. Where do you get the time?
Hello, Ricky, and thank you so much for having me on the show. Good question. 20 years it took to get there, and it's funny to hear it back. Gosh, a bit humbled by all that.
What led you to pursue a career in architecture?
Oh, I was the little kid who used to play with Lego. And also I was a bit of a naughty boy. I didn't follow the rules on the box. I was always loving to get the new Lego. However, I had to build what I wanted to do. So I guess from a very, very, very early age, uh, from around about, oh gosh, 7 or 8, I knew that I wanted to make things. But it took a little while for me to actually land what I wanted to make. I've got a funny story with the Lego. When I worked with Mardi Gras in 2015, when we had Danny Minogue appear on the stage, back when Young Talent Time, which many of you might know was a show that was coming from Melbourne across Australia, kids singing and dancing every weekend. I used to, as an 8-year-old, remake the sets out of Lego every week, as a little kid passion project, I guess. And then finally, just by chance, Danny was the headline act for Mardi Gras, and I got to design the stage that she was on. So the little 8-year-old in me was incredibly excited that I got to actually do that.
You're tapping into my next question. Was what were some of your highlights working at the Mardi Gras?
The 2023 Mardi Gras party was a bit of a highlight. We returned after the lockdown. We had a few years break from the party, and it was really, really important that we welcome the community back. And what I really wanted to do was, it was a Sydney World Pride year. We also I really wanted to do something with the First Nations community. And there's a tradition at Mardi Gras that every 10 years, uh, on the 10-year mark, for the 10th anniversary, 20th, 30th, the drag queens from all around Australia and the world, actually, they come together on the stage and they perform I Am What I Am. But given that it was the 45th anniversary, it wasn't quite the rounded decade. I thought we'd do something different and bring that tradition back. And I approached Electric Fields to do a First Nations version of I Am What I Am, which was incredible. They brought some First Nations language to the track. And we also were fortunate enough to have drag queens from all over, First Nations drag queens from all over Australia come and perform on our stage. So for me, that's a big highlight to see the Australia-wide community come together and celebrate.
I've always been fascinated when people like yourself are involved in putting together something like Mardi Gras. How does architecture lend itself to uh, organising the actual event? Like, what sort of ways does architecture contribute to the whole process?
Architecture training, the study of architecture is about space. And the performances and the parade and these sort of major events also use, it's about space. And it's about how you articulate a space and you insert forms into it. In architecture, traditionally, of course, we know we've got from large scale to small scale. It's a home, it's where you live, it's where you work, it's where you go to be entertained. Whereas theatre or performance, on the other hand, is about taking those ideas and accentuating them. Same process, much sped up. Though I find with Mardi Gras in the architecture world, my palette might be concrete bricks and timber. In Mardi Gras, it's glitter, paints, and rainbows. That seems to be the difference between the two. Uh, but it's also, it really is very, very similar tools are used across the two of them. Same process. You have a client, deliver a brief, uh, work with a client to develop the best brief, and then work with the workshop. I love working in Mardi Gras world or the event world. It's so wonderful to work with artists to create something. I've really enjoyed making floats as well as the sets for Mardi Gras because you're working with the community. We work with really passionate people who give so much back and they bring their artistry to it. So I suppose one of the differences I do with my designs for the parade, for example, or even with parties, I loosen up my documentation so I allow them to provide a little artistic embellishments themselves. So I'm not so strict on how it should look and how it should feel. I like the community to have a say in there too.
One of the things that always has fascinated me, George, and I've been watching Mardi Gras since the 80s, is the floats and the creation. What happens to the floats? Because there are so memorable depictions of or caricatures of political people, and that where do they live once the Mardi Gras season finishes?
Well, this is what's so great. We have, over 350 floats every year, which is incredible. There's 350 different community organisations that make floats, and they often reuse them and repurpose them. Mardi Gras itself, when they make their own floats, they've got a workshop. They now have a permanent workshop, which is fantastic. And they keep a lot of their original floats. Now, Mardi Gras, of course, in its history, it's gone under a few times. It's been resold. It's been brought back as a phoenix from the fire. During often when it goes down, a lot of sell-off occurs. So we have lost a lot of that history, unfortunately. Though I do believe that the Australian Queer Archives down in Melbourne actually has quite a few pieces, which is great, and I'll be down there to borrow them one day. But the Mardi Gras now keeps them, which is great. They have a system where they store things in shipping containers, and often they're kept off site waiting for the season. We've lost sleazeball. Well, we don't have sleazeball at the moment in Sydney. Mardi Gras used to work on a two-prong system where they'd have Mardi Gras in March or late February, March, and then they'd have sleazeball in October. So across the 6 months in between, the company used to roll between both. Now that it's just Mardi Gras, there's a big gap in the middle. So the workshop does tend to close down, even though now they've got their permanent site. And then it all ramps up in around about September, October, where we really start to seriously plan for the next year.
And what led you to take on the role as curator at Qtopia? And as you get to explain that, maybe tell us what is Qtopia?
As I ended up in Mardi Gras, I knew someone at Mardi Gras and I just knew I could design. And I went in and I asked Mardi Gras where, if there was somewhere I could help. And then, 2 weeks later, I'm sitting at a table with Ignatius Jones and the incredible Gary Leeson and Jane Becker to do creative work. That was 10 years ago, 12 years ago. And almost the same thing happened here at Qtopia. I saw Qtopia was starting up. I'd worked so much with the community in trying to tell their stories in different ways. The palette of Mardi Gras, of course, is parades, floats, and the events, the parties, and trying to tell the story of the community through those. So Qtopia to me just seemed like a really natural next step. So I knew Elaine, the chair of the board, and I approached Elaine. I sent her an email and I asked, can I help in any way? Wasn't necessarily looking for a job. I just thought, can I contribute? What can I do to help? And very fortunately, the timing was right. And Liz Bradshaw, the original lead curator, we clicked. We had very good rapport, and we began the job of doing Qtopia. Now, to understand what Qtopia is a place of storytelling. through various mediums. We have a very strong exhibition spaces. We also have a very strong theatre spaces, and we also have event spaces. So again, it's storytelling in various forms.
And that's really interesting. So it's not like a space of the past. It sounds to me as though it embodies the embryotic fluidity of what's happening also at the climate snapshot of what's happening in our community and capturing that.
We're in the old police station here at Taylor Square, and it's an incredible building with a very, very, very diverse history. It was a place of vilification for the community.
Mm.
It's a contentious space. There was baiting. It was a place of violence, and not just for the LGBTQI community, but also for the First Nations community, for the sex worker community, and for new immigrants as well. Just in the nature of this area of Darlinghurst and Paddington, and the changing demographics through this space. It's really, really interesting because the building, we've inherited it and it's heritage listed, which means we can't change the fabric, the building fabric of the building too much. We've got to keep the walls where they are. It's cells, it's the original cells that people were brought into. And in a traditional museum setting, often you're just given a white box or even a black box, which is quite wide and big, and you divide it up as need be. But this building naturally creates all these little spaces for multiple storytelling in different ways, different design languages, which is what we've attempted to do. So every space feels different to the next because our community is so diverse and there are so many stories to tell. We are only just started. We opened with 19 exhibitions, and we're already in the next 2 or 3 months we're going to start the changeover and starting to take some out and begin the process of introducing even more stories to Qtopia.
How do you select artists and artworks to feature in Qtopia?
It's interesting. It's a little bit of where we've started. There's a very interesting range of topics that we started with. There are some obvious ones that we wanted to do, but we didn't have the space. The big ones, for example, is I really want to dive deep into family, and I also want to examine bullying as well, which are two topics that we haven't quite touched on. And so by doing so, we think thematically, we come up with the areas that we want to focus on, um, and then we move forward in finding the right artists, in finding the right researchers. I work closely with academic institutions for the research side. And then we do a lot of public consultations, such as workshops, where I invite people in. We discuss. We have a lot of meetings. We have a lot of, I call them board meetings, but they're not really board meetings. They're around the board table. We sit down, we discuss. It's an open conversation. My job, I see it, is to really provide a platform for community, for the stories from our community. And I just want to empower them. So the more the people come in and tell me, the more we sort of sit through the process of that, working out how do we take all this and visually represent it and present it in a way.
And what impact do you hope to have on visitors who come to your spaces through the art displayed there and the different performances?
Qtopia again is so varied in its visual languages. We've got everything from very typical museum exhibitions right through to the quite abstract. I want any visitor to come through just to see how amazing our community is and how diverse we are. Um, we've got the incredible Mardi Gras that we have every year, and it does its job incredibly well. For 46 years, it's been doing it. It's going to be here for another 46. But Qtopia, we want to tell stories in a different way. We want to go a little bit deeper. We want to cut deeper and a bit wider, a little bit more space to make it a bit more personable. I take great courage in seeing so many of I'm going to call them mainstream families, people that aren't part of the LGBTI community coming through and walking away by saying, wow, I didn't know that, or I didn't realize that, or gee, this is incredible. There is so much here to talk about. That's probably where I would like to see what people go away with, but also I view Qtopia as well as a place for community storytelling, for artists to share their arts and their forms as well. Our community is so rich in creativity. If I can capture just a little bit of that magic in here and showcase it, I'd be very happy.
And how do you support emerging artists in showcasing their work at Qtopia?
I always include emerging artists with a standard or established artists in all the new exhibitions. For example, in the toilet block, which we opened only probably a month ago now, we I made sure that I included a very new young, they're called King's Cross Stitch artists who do cross stitch. I always try and approach and always keep an eye on the new emerging art movement. And again, it has to be appropriate to the actual subject matter that we're trying to talk about.
And what role does technology play at Qtopia?
Technology plays a huge role. We have an aging population now in our community, and we are one of the initiatives that Qtopia is taking is actually recording the stories of our community elders, which I hope to use in the future as some type of exhibition. So we're using that technology wise in the exhibition space. Projections, mapping, project mapping is all incredibly important. We have generations now of children who the devices that are created are so intuitive that for a 2-year-old can work out how to flip through a phone. So when they come to Qtopia, it's we the exhibitions can't be the traditional stagnant just objects in space. We've got to provide that multimedia layer to it as part of our storytelling techniques. But having said that, at the same time, I get excited when we take it all out. Like, for example, we've got an exhibition here called Dirty Words, and all
Mhm.
that is just white light and black text. There is no color, no imagery, and you are forced to engage with font. You're forced to engage with black and white text and to read poetry. And that's important too. So we approach it from multiple angles here.
And how do you engage with the local community and promote art education at Qtopia?
We have a huge education program that we're just starting up. We are working with the New South Wales Board of Studies to actually to create a curriculum. We're weaving into the curriculum so that we'll have school groups come through. We are currently working with rainbow families to encourage to have the wonderful family community come through as well, but also through outreach. I spend a lot of time talking to people and inviting them in. I spend a lot of time down on the floor, actually in the space, talking to the people that come through and watching their reaction and seeing what their questions are. That's so important to me as well.
And can you sort of give us any of your thoughts on the challenges or trends that you have observed in the world of contemporary art and how this sort of intersects with Qtopia?
With the influence or the power of the galleries themselves and the need to conform to create works that sell, has sort of brought about a very standardized language of what art is. And what I really want Qtopia to be is a place where we break free of the box. Just by the nature of where we are, we've taken over a police station, an institutional building, and we've occupied it. The queer community uh, has a history of taking over abandoned spaces and bringing life to them, bringing culture to them. I get so excited when I see the innovation or a new way of doing something. And just look, traditionally, we do it in such great ways. Just look at Priscilla and taking a thong and turning it into a dress. I mean, that's pure Australian creativity right there. Taking the found object, that excites me. So when we look at the art world and we look at what's being created there and just what's being created particularly for the gallery system, the selling system, here at Utopia, we're not in the game, we're not in the business of selling your art. We want your art to tell the story, what the artist's interests are, what they want to say, and exhibiting it that way, which is, again, just one of many ways that we're pushing forward. One exhibition here, actually, which I really love, is the 130 beats per minute, which was curated by Bertie Blackman. And what she did was we asked her to research the last 40 years of queer music. Uh, and she has an example from about the 60s right through to today of artists, and the criteria was that they had to be openly queer, and that we asked each one of them to put forward one song that they'd like to show. And so we've got this wonderful queer history from about the 60s right through to today of music videos down in one of our spaces of just light and music video goodness. It's we've put this one. It's actually not in the main. We're in the police station. We've got another building just next door, which is called the old substation, and it was the substation number 7. It was built in the early 20th century, and sat dormant. It's full of graffiti, and it's wonderful. It's subterranean. We didn't change the walls, the fabric. We actually wanted to keep it as it is, and we've just put in a projection screen and we're showing music. It's what we do in our community. We've brought music and culture into a space and celebrate it that way.
You have a particular exhibition. Is it like what sort of time frame do you allow it to situate and position itself in Qtopia?
We have quite a few exhibitions that are permanent. The ones
Mhm.
that are permanent are ones that are based on HIVA, the history of the site, the 78ers, of course, 1978, and the First Nations are welcome. However, all the other exhibitions are not permanent. We're doing a system actually. I'm doing some short range exhibitions which only last about three months, and those are community driven exhibitions. And the ones that we're starting off with, like for example, early in 2025, we're going to have Joyce Mange open up her wardrobe to us. And we're going to be putting an installation of what it's like to jump into the wonderful world of Joyce. That will only be on for 3 to 4 months, and then we will change it over dramatically for the next one, and the next one, and the next one. A few of the others are a little bit longer. For example, when I open up in 2025, we're also doing an exhibition on sexuality, the definitions of sexuality, in particular bisexuality and the umbrella terms and the fluidity of sexuality that we can learn through that particular lens. That would be an exhibition that we'd keep for probably a year, 2 years, pending on the pressures. But again, we're in a fortunate position with this occupation mentality with Qtopia that we can change them out as we need to. If something becomes topical, I can probably get an exhibition in within a month or two.
And now for a little bit of a controversial topic. How does Qtopia process censorship?
I treat our audience as mature, which means that I think that they have the ability to understand, and the information that we give them isn't sanitized or watered down. We've been very, very deliberate in not editing us. I think the society has asked our community to edit ourselves for way too long, and Qtopia is not the space to be edited. We try and tell the stories as they are, but obviously, because we have school groups coming through, and we've got like primary school children coming through, I might keep the swear words out of it a little bit. But otherwise, subject matter wise, we're very deliberate in showing it as it is. We did open the toilet block, and that is definitely an over 18s exhibition, because if we're going to show male sexuality, I didn't want to have to edit that down and not show it. So it goes full throttle down there, and you get to see what a sauna was like, what the public toilets were like, and you might even learn what the hanky code might mean in detail. However, there are other spaces where, for example, in the cells themselves are quite traumatic. We are in the original cells. These cells were had seen not so pleasant days, and so when it comes time to talking about the atrocities that occurred within these spaces, um, we deliberately place those particular stories up high, probably above around the 6 foot mark, up really high. So, for example, a primary school child, if they came through, they won't read them. The language that we use in telling the story, of course, is friendly to it. We don't hide away from telling it, but we've sort of been a little bit careful in that sort of placement. Um, but having said that, I don't believe any topic is off is above being spoken about, be it there's lots of controversies around Qtopia, and we have addressed them head on in the exhibition space. For example, the mainstream media, we have a critical corridor where we show 50 years of media reporting by the mainstream press, and all medias are represented there to show how all different publications have used language to vilify or create conditions around our community.
And now, in terms of getting to Qtopia and visiting the space, for those in the community who have disability and accessibility requirements, is Qtopia a space that can be accessed by someone with accessibility needs?
Because it's an old building that was built in the late 19th century, there are limitations to a lot of the spaces. We have improved that. Yes, you can come in with, and there's different levels to accessibility. If we're talking physical accessibility requirements, yes, we've put in ramps so people can access all the rooms. Some of the cells, for example, have very narrow entrances. We found you can just squeeze a wheelchair in, which is fantastic. So it's anyone can move into any of the spaces, but also we've also got visual and audio, hearing accessibility as well as sensitivity exhibitions as well. And what we're doing is we're actually hosting quarterly special nights where people with different requirements can come in, where we make sure that people from that community, even with the limitations of the building as they are, that we add extra layers to it so they can experience the exhibition spaces as they would like to. Having said that, for example, the toilet block, there's a spiraling staircase to get down into it. We don't have a lift down in there, so physically, unless you can manage a set of stairs, that's the only way down at the moment. We are talking to the city council, hoping to get they'd invest and put some lifts in and whatnot for us, but that's part of the process. We've only been open now for a very short time, so we're working with government to expand and improve. We're already in talks at the moment. Qtopia is the ground floor of the police station, and we're now talking about going up to the first level, which is very exciting, which is literally doubling the exhibition space.
Now, the other thing I was thinking as you're speaking, there may be people all around Australia who participated in the Mardi Gras floats and been part. Or could they get in contact with Qtopia if they wanted to perhaps donate something? Is it possible that people can contact Qtopia to donate anything that they might have?
Yes, they can. Absolutely. Would love to hear from them. There is a link on the website. However, what's wonderful, and since we've opened, there isn't a day that goes past where I don't receive an email from someone with the most incredible treasure that they've been either hiding under their bed, kept in a garage somewhere, and these are wonderful, wonderful, and things that are coming out of the woodwork continuously. So I'd love to hear from everybody. What if you have something that you think would be of interest? Absolutely.
Wouldn't it be wonderful to capture those stories too of our community, to telling a little bit about an artifact and what that artifact meant for them at that time and place in their lives?
No, absolutely. I mean, technology, you mentioned technology earlier, but there is some fantastic technology around at the moment. For example, I'm incredibly interested in the hologram idea, which is that it's actually an AI human or AI
Mm.
humanoid of the person, and you can ask it live questions and it will answer your question. It's incredible. So, and it's based on the information through interviews with the individual. And I'm really interested in getting that sort of storytelling into Qtopia. And it's unfortunate that HIV/AIDS wiped out a generation of from our community, and I think it's really, really, really important to capture the stories of those who are left right now. There's a whole generation now of the young LGBTQI kids coming up who don't know about the impact that HIV/AIDS had on the community, how we lost, imagine losing all your friends within months, and running the risk. One thing we did find out actually in our research with the HIV/AIDS memorial that we have is just how vibrant Mardi Gras and the community across Australia became, especially in the 80s and 90s. It's almost as though they stood up again in the face of adversity and simply said, no, we're not going to, we are going to be as bright and as colourful as we can be for those that we've lost, as well as for the needs that we need right now. And again, that's what we need to capture, and that's what I want to capture to share for future generations.
George, do you have any stories that you can tell us about the impact of Qtopia for young people, perhaps exploring their gender and sexuality, um, and how what Qtopia could mean to them?
Yes, Ricky, we have had quite a few young people come through Qtopia, which is really, really encouraging. We have a space on trans identity and its intersection with drag, and we have areas that are focused on the lesbian experience as well as the gay male experience, bisexual experience. But recently, we actually had, we were downstairs on the floor and we noticed an individual, and he was walking around and he'd been downstairs for a couple of hours. And eventually, after a volunteer approached them, we found out that he'd come to Qtopia to find out about the community before he went home to come out to his parents. So, so important that and so special that that happened, that they came here to find out about their community.
We finally have a place and space where young people who are really exploring their richness of their identity can go into a physical space, look through the footprints of the past, and connect with our culture, our identities, and then go home and say, yes, this is my community, this is who I am. And we finally have that safe place, and that to me is the essence of Qtopia. George, on that. It's been absolutely wonderful to hear you speak so passionately about space and place. I think that will resonate with so many of us in the community and future generations where they can really go in and explore and connect with those that we have lost and really have a sense of pride of who we are, and our footprints will always remain. Thank you so much, George, for spending some time with us, and we look forward to hearing more exciting things that are going to take place with Qtopia in the future.
Look forward to seeing you all up here one day.
It's been an absolute pleasure in speaking with George Savoulis, the creator at Qtopia in Sydney. It's a space and place that resonates so deeply for me. Somebody who's for decades travelled to Sydney because there were times when it was the only state I felt really safe to be with community. And now finally, there is a building where we can go and reconnect with our past memories, relive them, and share them and build new memories. Thank you, George Savalas.
Thank you so much, Ricky, for having me.